Okay, so this is lesson 11.1. We're talking about congruent figures. So remember, congruent means the same measure. Well, congruent figures have the same size and the same shape. So figures that have the same size and same shape are called congruent figures. The triangles below are congruent. Matching angles are called corresponding angles. And matching sides are called corresponding sides. So you might think, if I were to lay one triangle, for instance, triangle ABC, over triangle DEF, which angles would match up? Which sides would match up? Those are corresponding angles and corresponding sides. In example 1, naming corresponding parts. The figures are congruent. Now they tell us they're congruent. We don't have to figure out they're congruent. We'll take them at their word. It says name the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides. So corresponding angles. Angle A on the top figure corresponds with angle W on the bottom figure because they would overlap if we were to lay those shapes over each other. Angle B and angle X correspond, angle C and angle Y correspond, and angle D and angle Z correspond. Likewise with the sides, side AB on the first figure corresponds with side WX. Now notice, AB is listed, the first point is A, the second point is B. We have to, when we list side WX, list them in the same order, W, then X. Then B and C correspond with X and Y. Side CD corresponds with side YZ. And finally, side DA corresponds with ZW. Or the way they listed it, side AD corresponds with side WZ. Before we read this key idea, let's look over at the left where it says the symbol and then that equal sign with a squiggle over the top of it means is congruent to. So equal and congruent mean almost the same thing, but the equal sign means two numbers are equal to each other, where the congruent sign means they're the same measure. So we should use the congruent sign, although if you use the equal sign, nobody's going to call the cops on you. Identifying congruent figures. So two figures are congruent when their corresponding angles and their corresponding sides are congruent. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. And the reason is we can go through each of the corresponding sides and see they are congruent. They tell us they're congruent with the one arc on B and the one arc on E, letting us know those are congruent angles. The two arcs on C and F, those are congruent angles. And the three arcs on A and D, they're congruent angles. The same can be said about the sides. Side AB and side DE both have one tick mark. That lets us know they're congruent. BC and EF have two tick marks, so they're congruent. And CA and FD have three tick marks. Therefore, they're congruent. Here in example 2, identifying congruent figures, it says, which square is congruent to square A? Now, it's easy to tell all of their corresponding angles are congruent because they're all 90-degree angles. And all 90-degree angles are congruent to each other because they're all 90 degrees. So we're just looking at their corresponding sides. So obviously, square A and square C are congruent because square A, each of its sides is 8. And square C, each of its sides equals 8. Square B, its sides are equal to 9. It's not congruent to either of the other squares. So square A and C are all of their corresponding sides are congruent. Therefore, square C is congruent to square A. In example 3, using correspondent or congruent figures. Trapezoids ABCD and JKLM are congruent. What is the length of side JM? Well, side JM corresponds to side AD, and side AD is 10 feet. Therefore, side JM is also 10 feet. What is the perimeter of JKLM? Well, the perimeter of ABCD is 8 plus 6 plus 8 plus 10, 32 feet. So JKLM will also be 8 plus 6 plus 8 plus 10, 32 feet. Each of them have a perimeter of 32 feet because they're congruent figures.